Welcome back to the garage. In this video, we're going to be changing out basically all of the brake system on my 1990 Nissan 300ZX Twin Turbo Z32. Now, the reason I'm replacing all the brakes on this car is because generally they're old. They're about 25 years old. The pads are getting really thin, the brake lines are looking really worn, and just generally the whole system is very antiquated. The other reason is that I've signed up for a track day in about 4 days, and I want this thing to be safe out on the track. Now, I did a track day with this car about a year ago, and I would say the one aspect of that car that made me feel a little uncomfortable were the brakes. Every time I'd go into a corner pretty hot, the brake pedal would never be at the same distance that it was the previous corner. The pads would have a bunch of fade, and it just generally didn't feel like a very high performance brake system. So in this video, we're going to be solving that. But first, let's take a look at the condition of the brakes on the car as it is right now. Now, a keen eye will be able to tell that these are not your standard 300ZX Z32 twin turbo brakes. Instead, these brakes are actually from the contemporary R32 GTR Skyline. So you notice these front calipers, they're aluminum, they're a bit chunkier than the original Z32 ones, and also the rotors are quite a bit thicker. So these are original Nissan parts from the Skyline GTR, and so they're actually pretty good brake components. They're just getting old and at the end of their service life. You'll also notice that the brake pads are getting pretty thin, and honestly, I don't know what pads those are in there. I don't think they're track day rated pads just because they seem to have a lot of fade once you get them heated up quite a bit. You can also see that they have steel braided brake lines on here. However, they're kind of the old school brake line design. They don't have a rubber sheath around the steel braiding, so they start to fray. Now, the front ones haven't started to fray, but in the back, as we'll see in a second, they have. So that's kind of a safety issue that I'll want to resolve. Since we're up here, we can see that this car has actually been set up to be ready for a track day. You see it has thicker sway bars on there, and then it has these track links, adjustable track links, that provide a little more rigidity and a little more adjustability up front. And the suspension, it has these still-in adjustable upper control arms, and then also it's got Eibach lowering springs. So really this car was set up to go to the track. It's just getting a little old, and we need to go through and replace the rotors, the lines, the pads, and the fluid. And again, much of the same story in the back. So these also are original Skyline GTR R32 discs. You can see they're getting pretty grooved. The rear calipers are the same between the R32 Skyline and the 300ZX Twin Turbo, so nothing's different on the caliper, but the pads, you know, they're about half-life. We'll be replacing those as well, but here is the biggest issue back here. You can see this brake line starting to fray right there. And that's bound to happen as it's, you know, the flexible part. As the suspension goes up and down, eventually this is going to wear out, which it is. And I would just hate to be on the track putting a lot of pressure through these lines and then all of a sudden it's able to spring a leak because it's no longer secure right there. So this is definitely a safety concern at this point. You can see I still have the four-wheel steering HICAS system hooked up. I actually really like the HICAS system. I'm not going to be uninstalling it. I know a lot of people, once they get, especially with higher horsepower cars, they take this out of there. I think it's really cool, and I want to keep this car relatively original, so that's going to be staying in there. And over here on the bench are all the parts I have bought to thoroughly redo the brake system on this car. And you can see that I've got some nice components up here, starting with DBA Club Spec T3 rotors for all the way around. I spent quite a lot of time looking for rotors that would really match both track and street use, that are able to hold up with the kind of heat that track use experiences. And after all my research, I found that the T3 series is really the rotor to go with. Now, there's a lot of manufacturers out there, but there aren't a lot of manufacturers that make them for the original R32 GTR Skyline disc size. So that was the challenging part of all my research, was finding discs that would match what's already on the car. I didn't want to go with the original style GTR brakes again, just because I'm not really a fan of drilled rotors. They are typically a weaker design, especially when subjected to track use. And also, the original rotors don't come with painted hub faces or the vanes. So when I found the DBA rotors, I saw that they not only had slotted style rotors, which is what I prefer, but they also had painted faces and a unique ventilation design that they call the kangaroo paw that supposedly is superior to your typical vanes that you see on rotors. So let's just take a glimpse at these things. they're not exactly inexpensive, but when you're buying track-rated parts, they never are. So you can see that these are the front rotors, and they have that thicker R32 GTR Skyline thickness. And DBA puts this heat paint on there so you can see how hot your brake rotors are getting. As these change colors, that tells you what temperature range you're getting up to on your rotors. So that's kind of a neat feature. And then these are the rear rotors, and these are basically like your stock Z32 rotors, other than they have a superior material and veining design. Now, to pair up with some track rotors, I found some track day specific pads, and these are made by Powerstop. I spent a long time looking for pads that I could use for both road and track use, because I don't want to be swapping pads at the track. That's when you get to the next level of track day, and I'm not quite there yet. I really want something that's going to work in both environments. And yeah, I'm excited to give these a try. These will certainly be better than what I had on there, that's for sure. And I think they'll hold up just fine, especially for my skill level. So I got those for front and rear. Now, to address the worn out brake lines, I got some StopTech steel braided units. These do have the rubber sheathing around the steel braiding, so they should last much longer. Got those for front and rear. Then I'm going to be replacing all of the brake fluid with RBF600 Motul racing brake fluid. So in there right now is the DOT 5.1. This is able to withstand a bit higher brake fluid temperatures. I think it's all the way up to 594 degrees. So that's a good brake fluid that you can also use on the street. And then over here, finally, I got a master cylinder brace. So I think this was a pretty large culprit to the strange brake pedal, or the inconsistent brake pedal feel I got from inside of the car. And that's because the master cylinder, in fact, flexes back and forth when you press on it really hard. So that effectively makes your brake pedal move in and out as your master cylinder moves in and out. So what this does is it bolts to the shock tower, and you screw this into the master cylinder to brace it so that it can't move back and forth. So this was relatively inexpensive for what's going to be an enormous improvement, I anticipate. And then I also got some new front brake caliper hard lines. As I was looking at the hard lines that are currently on the car, they're a little bit mangled looking. So these are original Z32 ones that I'm hoping that I can fit up directly to the R32 GTR calipers that are there. All right, so that's all of the parts. Let's get them installed. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is clean this caliper up. It's got caked on brake dust from probably 25 years ago. So that's the next thing. Just look at how much cleaner that caliper is now after some nice cleaning. These are pretty lightweight calipers, being aluminum. And These clean calipers are thanks to my good friend Nate out here doing the hard work. Look at that, pretty nasty stuff. So unfortunately I did have to grind this bracket right here because this hex piece on the brake line didn't fit in there and you couldn't put the securing clamp in there, so I had to break out the Dremel, widen it a little bit so now it fits securely. Now we can fit this into place. There's too many snakes on this motherfucking plane. What the? All right, so let's update right here. All of the brake parts are now finally installed, and holy cow, look how beautiful that rotor looks, and that cleaned up caliper, those new brake pads, and new stainless steel brake lines. No longer has that bulging brake line there. Now, what's left is to flush the brake system, the fluid out of the brake system, with some RBF600 racing brake fluid. All right, so now the brakes are completely installed, the fluid is flushed, and we are now ready to hit the track. I've already taken the car out and started to bed in the brake pads, but really these are best bedded in on the track just because of the speeds and the heat and the number of cycles you need to put them through in order to properly bed them in. Just get a glimpse of behind those wheels. Those discs look so nice. Everything is so clean. It's already a huge visual improvement over where we were with the old stuff. Those brakes mean business. And one other thing I've decided to try out for this track day is a Garmin Catalyst trainer type system. So it's this tablet looking thing that's mounted to the windshield, and it comes paired up with this camera, and what it does is analyzes your laps and tells you where you can improve your times and improve your lines, and tell you where you can brake harder and just carry more speed through turns. So this is a pretty cool tool that I'm very excited to try out. It has lots of good reviews of actual use out there on tracks throughout the world. So I'm going to put this to the test at Heartland Park here soon. So until then, we'll see you guys again next time.